So this evening we celebrate the promotion of Eva Kipnis. Congratulations, Eva. Eva is now a Professor of Marketing. And I think I'm right in saying that this is the first time that we've celebrated the promotion of a professor in the school by marking it with an inaugural lecture. So you're very brave as well. So Eva, again, congratulations on your promotion to Professor of Marketing. Now then, I know that members of Eva's family are here today and some are watching online. So we want to give a special welcome to her husband, Chris Parks, and her son, Garrick, here in person. Thank you for coming. I know that you must be very, very proud of Eva. I'm sure you are. I can see it and in your face. And also to her son, Daniel, who's watching online, who's had an exam, I understand, at university today. So I hope he's feeling better about it. And together with parents Lev and Yelena Kipnis, we also extend thanks to your brother Mikhail and his family, and a special mention to your nephew Jan. Now then, our mission at the University of Bradford is to drive sustainable and economic development through our outstanding teaching and research, and inclusion and trust are at the heart of everything we do. And I get sort of warm feelings increasingly because every time I go to listen to any of our academics speak or to any event that might be an accreditation event or a graduation event, we hear more and more our academics and our professional service staff being able to talk about our real mission of wanting to be the place to be to make a difference. And we should be all proud of making sure that everything we do chimes with this approach to inclusivity. And I'll say a little bit about that in relation to Eva's work in a few moments. So Eva was born in Kazakhstan and has a degree in economics and machinery building. That was news to me. I mean, really amazing. Following the footsteps of her father, Lev, who was an emeritus professor of machinery building at the Kardigana Technical University in Kazakhstan. That's probably, you followed in your father's footsteps. Must have been hugely influential.
It's my inspiration.
Is your wow, wow. It's great, isn't it, for people who've got amazing inspiration from their parents. But so many people attend university now. It was an inspirational teacher that moved you to focus your attention on marketing. And we're very grateful for that. So after graduating from university, Eva went on to the marketing industry for 10 years before pursuing her long-held dream of entering academia. So she's really had to do double work, I would say, because this is a second career. And a lot of women do enter into academia as a second career. I did myself, but not only women, many people do. And I know Vishanth as well. This was the case for you, wasn't it? So she earned a PhD in marketing from Durham University, from which she received the Best Thesis Award. That's amazing. And dedicated her academic career to transforming marketing into an enabler for social good, and actively involved herself in initiatives and organisation that aligned with her goal. So she's currently a member of the Transformative Consumer Research Movement, where she currently serves on the advisory board, and Women in Marketing. The impact of Eva's work is particularly in the area of multicultural inclusion, and this is why it fits so well with our university mission and the mission of the school. And she was recognised in 2021 by a Women in Marketing Award in the Marketing Scientist category, which she received with an international team of collaborators forming Multicultural Marketplaces Research Network, which she co-founded and continues to co-chair. And this is really important, isn't it? Not only has she got a strong academic background and a good value base, she's moving and trying to influence beyond her scope of practice. So this network promotes diversity, inclusion and engaged marketing and aligns with the university's vision, as I've said. Her real-world practical application, she seeks to understand how certain groups of people with particular characteristics, such as their ethnicity, women, people with disabilities, and we could go on, who are either included or excluded through marketing of certain products. For example, the flesh-coloured sticking plasters, which up until now recently were made for people of white skin. And I know that if Professor Rudy Archibong was here this evening, I do think she's listening online, she recently scolded herself, actually celebrating her 60th birthday, and was looking for something that would cover her skin up, which is black, and couldn't find anything. And ended up having to, I think, put a dressing on it and then cut up some dark coloured tights to put on top of it. So we will experience things like this, many people, time and time again, I'm sure. So Professor Kipnis's research aim is to understand what drives the decisions behind how such products are marketed and what effect this has on people, and importantly, how changes could foster positive change. She's also passionate about supporting and mentoring early career academics and has mentored several doctoral students and early career academics herself, many of which are now long-standing collaborators. So that means they like working with you and you make a difference to them. So in teaching, Eva's primary objective is to enable students to acquire a grasp of marketing and advertising with an appreciation of the ethical principles of responsible management practices, again, aligning to the vision and mission of the school and the university, and especially how they impact on cultural identification and outlooks on intercultural cultural experiences. So it's important that we understand how consumers relate to brands and organisations. It's important to the brands. So they need to be taking note of Eva's work on cultural identity. And her work has got so many parallels with, as I said, the long-term strategy of our university. I hope that you will be with us making a difference for some time to come. So I want to invite now Professor Eva Kipnis to deliver her inaugural lecture, Realising Inclusion and Justice from Policy Goals to Everyday Living. We need to talk about marketing. Eva.
I think now everybody should hear me. Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor, colleagues, my family. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for everyone who came. I hope you don't mind. Can I just say, Daniel, I hope the exam went okay. And thank you everybody else who is online watching too. Now, we do need to talk about marketing, and I will be frank to say that some of the conversations I was having before the lecture, as we were having drinks, surprised me, because I was thinking I will need to convince the audience a lot more as to why we need to talk about marketing. But actually people were saying things that are very, very similar to my thinking. So I hope I don't need to convince you as much. And never mind, I will do it from here. If only it worked. No. Okay, so when we say marketing, what comes to mind? And I'm pretty sure that the first few things that come to mind are not what I mean by marketing. They may be something like this: special offers, more offers very much in your face, sale, deal, promotions on Instagram. And this is how the majority of general public perceives marketing, and marketing does have a bit of an unfair name, I feel. Because marketing, yes, of course, some part of marketing is linked to sales, but it's not by far the most important part of what marketing is about. And I want to begin talking about marketing the way I see marketing by sharing this great video. And to me, this is one of my favorite things that marketing has ever produced, and I hope you agree. So quite different from the initial associations with marketing. And to me, this is the true power behind what marketing can do. Marketing creates meanings that surround us everywhere. And maybe let's have a look at a little bit more of the important work that marketing can do. Post-COVID, there was a big shortage of blood supply in this country. And this campaign, National Blood Week 2022, was developed, and it was very successful. Again, not the sole part of the solution, but a very important part of addressing social problems and really pressing societal problems as well. And I thought the Wakanda Forever collaboration was pretty cool as well. So ultimately what marketing does is that it takes what engineers, urban planners, architects, food developers, cosmetics developers produce and turn them into some unique experiences that have unique associations. And we can see, for example, that even when we think just in terms of Bradford, it doesn't have to be a really large brand. Or Morrison's, a huge brand now, started as a tiny brand, if I'm not mistaken, in 1899 as a market merchant. So again, the brand grew over the years. The biggest brand that is growing right now in Bradford, I believe, is City of Culture 2025. And again, there is a lot of effort developing Bradford's brand, and marketing is also part of this effort and drive. Now, how are these meanings created? I use this graph very often with students because, and again, I know there are people here who teach management and marketing. I don't need to teach you, but I'll just very quickly run through it just so that we recap, so to speak. Yes, there is core product, which is chocolate, which is important. We then add performance, particular performance characteristics such as taste, composition. We can think about filling. So for example, here you can see nuts, there are raisins, all sorts of other important components that make chocolate enjoyable for particular consumers. But then the third and very important layer is the layer of symbolism and experience. So I am sure I don't need to ask anybody what is hidden behind the white space. Yeah, a Kit Kat. And when we think about experiences, we also can think about emotions. And I will be showing a few adverts, but I won't show too many video adverts, I promise. But this is a very recent one, and I wanted to show it to you because I think it's a very nice sentiment. Okay, and of course, when we think about marketing, sometimes we're forgetting the sound. But this is Audio Logo. And which brand is this? Does anyone recognize it? Yeah, it's the iPhone. So marketing looks after a lot of meanings. They're not necessarily all visual. They're not necessarily all with packaging. They are all about the entirety of the brand. And this is why I really so much enjoy marketing. Not only marketing produces meanings, it also reflects meanings as they are in the social history and social life. So if we have a look at how the meanings conveyed by one brand evolved between 1951 and 2015, we can see this evolution. History in adverts. And we can see the gender stereotypes in 1951. And we can see that in 2015, Harley-Davidson was still not doing very well. But nevertheless, we can see even this very masculine-focused brand has been evolving the understanding of female relationships with bikes. How do we create meanings? Well, we create them via cultural signals, and there is a lot of signals that we can send. These include portrait social roles, and if you cannot see very well, this is Helen Mirren running on the steps of L'Oreal's headquarters. Color and different colors mean different things in different cultures. So the same brand, Nestlé, this is a UK-based packaging, this is a France-based packaging, and we can see that color plays a very important role in conveying the brand's personality and connecting with the audiences. We also can see styles of dress, models, and then also country and culture associations. And I hope you are recognizing how cleverly, for example, color combination and brand name are working in some of these. So if you look at Bertolli, we think it's an Italian brand, not only because of the name, but also because the color of the label emulates the Italian flag color. Honda talked about itself as local, and I took this picture when looking through one of our local newspapers, because it was manufactured in the UK, and it talked about itself as a global brand with local roots. Brands use language. You can see that there is a bit of rivalry going on between cider brands in terms of which brand owns the cider pronunciation. So there is a lot happening, and marketeers need to understand how to utilize these cultural meanings and signals to engage with their audiences. And this is where I pretty much started my work. I was interested to know what happens when people interact with multiple cultural meanings via marketing. If we go now to a supermarket, we can experience brands associated with so many cultures. Even if we walk through the streets of Bradford, we will see a Tex-Mex, an Indian restaurant, an Italian restaurant. So we constantly interact with these various cultural meanings. And what happens when people do so? So a few projects that I've done in, if you like, that time of my career, looked at foreign brands and how foreign brands or non-local brands to developing countries, how do they make routes and engage with consumers? And we found that consumers expect connection. And it has been done since many, many times. We talked about think global, act local. So it is about participating in local manufacture. It is about utilizing and engaging local resources, be it water. Part of my project was about drinks manufacture. So consumers were talking about how important it is to use water. They also talked about how important it is to use local recipes. So it is about being part of something bigger and yet also being something very embedded in the local community. Much like Bradford is, I would say, our university is to City of Bradford as well. Now, a few other projects looked at what does living in cultural diversity mean to my identity? And my PhD involved looking at how people become multicultural and how they then engage in consumption. And when I talk about being multicultural, well, I can give an example of myself. So I'm originally from Kazakhstan. My husband is English. My children are, yeah. It depends. It depends who they need to please, I would say. But ultimately, we celebrate so many different occasions and celebrations. We wear different things. We eat different food. We dance to different music. So when we think about our consumption and how we then engage in different consumption rituals and celebrations, it's quite an enriched life in this regard when we have access to these different cultural resources. And I must say that I was very happy to find in the UK foods that I liked to eat at home. And this is very, very important. It's a small thing until you move away from home, and then you realize how big of a thing it is. And another project looked at the motivations to consume. And I hope my great colleague Christina is watching, who was the inspiration behind this project. And I really enjoyed working with her on it. And ultimately, what we've discovered was that there are also different motivations that drive people using products with different cultural meanings. For some, it is about being part of this larger world and being part of the humanity. But others treat experiencing different cultural products and consumption more as an instrumental approach of getting ahead in their life. So, for example, when they prepare for a future career and they envisage themselves traveling across different countries, they need to understand what are the customs, how to behave, and they would prepare themselves by going to these restaurants at home and experiencing this. And also, they were very mindful of the fact that we now live in a culturally diverse society and we need to get along with our friends and colleagues. And some just considered it as entertainment, something to vary your life and convenience. It was interesting that this piece attracted a lot of attention. We were published in The Conversation, and then it was republished by El Financier. So we realized that there is something that really connects and appeals to people, because we all experience these tiny little interactions with diversity, and we really enjoy them. Building on that, we also started looking at multicultural identity, but also multicultural intelligence and agility. And multicultural intelligence, defined simply, is the ability to engage in a culturally diverse community and society. And we were interested to understand how people utilize outputs of marketing, be it advertising, be it social media, be it food, to develop this cultural intelligence and agility. So we've done a few projects on that, and we got to a point of also well-being. So yes, we all live in cultural diversity. When we come across some of the meanings marketing create, is it always a pleasant and enjoyable experience for everybody? And we started examining such issues as stereotyping in advertising and design of market spaces. And then also we looked at the experiences in South Africa, because we think that South Africa is a blueprint for us to understand how marketing to multicultural audiences is done. They have had this Rainbow Nation brand. It's not perfect, but there is a lot more know-how in South Africa than actually in Western-based nations when it comes to connecting with multicultural consumer audiences. And the reason why it is important is because when marketing gets it wrong, it's not good. Here is the infamous COVID time advert by the UK government that very quickly pulled because, and does anyone know why it was pulled? Yeah, so women were portrayed in domestic roles, whereas men were watching TV. So you would think that a marketeer working on this important campaign would by now be able to reflect on this and think. And I think this is why we all need to talk about marketing, because very, very often when I read up on what has happened and I try to understand what has happened, it is an honest mistake. It is an honest oversight. It is ignorance. It's lack of awareness, and it's lack of understanding. It's rarely mean-intended. Nevertheless, the impact is as negative as it would be if it was ill-intended. This is a very recent advert in the US. Is there anything wrong with this? Well, again, very ageist portrayal of older people. That's all they're good for, right? Ride a scooter and nothing else, and complain maybe all the time. And then this is, these stories, they keep resurfacing with different airlines when airlines don't supply chairs for consumers with disabilities, and people have to crawl to use the bathroom, or they have to be stuck for hours on an airplane, or they simply are refused boarding. And again, airline is a service. So why wouldn't airline consider customer experience? This is what we teach. We've been teaching this for 50 years, and yet these are all very recent experiences. So much so is the impact is that the UN now recognized this and founded the Unstereotype Alliance that's looking to change perceptions and social norms for gender equality. So policymakers are recognizing this. And the reason why is because trust in brands is higher than it is in governments. And I'm not making it up. It is a study done by Edelman. Edelman is a large market research agency, and this is a study done in 2018 that actually shows in 8 countries, only one country, China, trust in government is higher than trust in brands. In Brazil, people trust brands and businesses 39% more. In the UK, 7% trust brands more than governments. That's not to say that brands are these benign forces. I'm not advocating this kind of benevolent view of brands, but there is a trend that is very palpable where there are emerging brands that are more socially responsible, that really want to develop with the community and produce benefit for the community. And consumers now expect it. So not only they trust brands, but they also trust brands to get it right. They want brands to do it right. They want organizations to do it right. So when we think about policy goals, and we can think about them from various levels. So yes, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we know them all by now. Marketing probably plays a big role in at least 6, because all these goals, if you look at their definitions, they talk about promoting inclusion. Gender equality is self-explanatory. No poverty talks about inclusive access to economic resources. Economic resources now, what is an economic resource? A mobile phone, a laptop is an economic resource. This is how people apply for jobs. So if we don't develop a mobile phone or a laptop that is accessible to people on low income, this is a problem and this is a barrier for them. Good health and well-being talks about equitable, inclusive access to public health. Reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities also talks about inclusive justice, also talks about representation. In Bradford, so thinking more locally, these are among priorities stated by Bradford Council, and they include inclusive economy, communities, and also accessible services. So if inclusion is so high on our agenda, perhaps to also think about inclusion more deeply, we need to start by thinking about what is exclusion. So what is it that we don't want to see? And exclusion can be defined as an economic and social experience of injustice that has implications for quality of life. Importantly, it's underpinned by various mechanisms, and marketing is one of those mechanisms, because these mechanisms cause individuals and communities experience barriers to accessing resources. The trick here is that those of us who don't experience these barriers rarely are aware of these. We don't notice them, we don't see them. If we don't need a different color plaster, why would we think about one? And this is how this exclusion is reproduced. It's not only about what marketeers do in their jobs, it's also about what marketeers we put in these jobs. And this is partly why I wanted to come to Bradford, because our diverse student community will be the fantastic ambassadors who will hopefully be able to further along the change, because we need the diversity facing consumers, but we also need to further diversity in the profession. And a few examples of why and how marketing can cause exclusion. These are all, by the way, summarized from research reported in various journals. So there are examples of denial of access, a restaurant denying service to a family with a child with disabilities. Again, because they were not equipped, they were concerned about health and safety, risks, ultimately, and therefore this family could not enjoy the customer experience that they deserved. Non-accommodation for particular and various needs and characteristics, and these include non-provision for low income or impairments, as in the example of the airline, non-accommodation for skin tones or body types in product development, omission or non-representation in media or advertising, and also discriminatory treatment, which I know many of you would be familiar with several examples, and they are given here, so I'm not going to list them. So when we think about, okay, so this is what we don't want. Inclusion, what is inclusion? And inclusion is actually very simply defined. It is about how all people experience the environments. The environment, be it a city environment, be it a shopping center. What they need to experience is I matter here. So the belonging and also being valued are the two important sensations that we hope to create. Expectations of feeling inclusion and being included are growing with the general public, and they are impacting what marketeers do. There are a few examples, and again, there is many of them. I've been collecting them all my life, so I could have done just 3 hours with just examples. But Peloton, a couple of years ago, lost $1.5 billion overnight because of the sexist advert that they developed. The IKEA in China were forced to apologize because they have developed a campaign representing women, which are called in China leftover women. So these are women who didn't marry by the age of 24, I think, or 25. And they have gone out with this advertising campaign, and younger consumers were absolutely angry. So the inclusive for all is a trend which by now reached a top 10 global consumer trend. And the power of consumers to change what brands do is really growing. So if we look at these statistics, they're truly staggering. These are the lost incomes if brands do not cater for inclusion. 4.5 billion is the annual purchasing power of multi-ethnic people just in the UK alone. And $5 trillion is the projected annual purchasing power of people over 60 in Europe, in the entire Europe. It's a lot. So if all these consumers start voting as they do with their wallets, brands need to listen. So that's how we got to 2017, where we formed with my colleagues. Hi, I hope you're here, and if you can't be here, I will talk to you later. As Multicultural Marketplace Network, I want to, and I don't want to name all of them, but I want to draw everyone's attention to those wonderful people at the bottom of the slide, without who this work would not be possible. The type of work that we do cannot happen in a small team. And we are very, very fortunate to be working as part of transformative consumer research movement, because this is what they do, and this is how we learned to work as a large team. We are able to conduct studies in multiple countries. We are able to conduct several studies simultaneously to bring together larger pieces of work to compare and contrast trends and identify patterns on a larger scale. So in this stream of work, we are looking at diversity and inclusion engaged marketing, and also beginning to unpack what does this mean? What does diversity and inclusion engaged marketing mean? And very importantly, what we have discovered, and this is the project we're working on right now, is that first and foremost, we need to teach students practical skills. When we teach marketing students, we shouldn't just teach them, don't be racist. They know this. We need to teach them how you practically address an ethno-racially diverse audience in a competent and effective manner. And we've done this by doing a project with students, and this is what students have told us. So we are working on the next project now. On a slightly different note, I want to give an example of a very current situation. So this was on LinkedIn yesterday. AI was asked how they imagine professors in different disciplines. So I'm not a typical professor in AI's mind. This is how professor in business should look. So AI clearly is learning from what has happened in the past. It needs a lot of training right now. Interestingly, there were some women, but in kind of professions like history of arts, and again, I celebrate female professors everywhere, but it was very interesting to see how gender biased AI was in allocating the expertise, so to speak. So the reason why I'm showing this is that we took what we've learned in doing the inclusion engaged marketing work and applied it in a very, very specific context of service of care robots. social and medical care robots. Very rapidly growing field. And yet, in a study conducted in the EU, while generally EU population was quite positive about robots in their lives overall, over 60% opposed robots in care for individual situations. And we were interested in understanding why. And we decided to ask a particular group that is very likely to be end users of these robots, should they become mass market, consumers with disabilities. And what we found is that these consumers have a very deeply seated belief, and that's the core of the issue, that the robots cannot care. So how can I accept a care robot if, in my view, it cannot care? It's an oxymoron. And some of the things that our consumers were telling us were very, very representative of this belief. I will read just this one. That act of wiping my face doesn't necessarily mean that you care about me. It's an act. That somebody is doing it so softly or gently or meaningfully, that comes across in the warmth and the emotions of that individual. So we can incorporate care robots however much we want, but if the consumer believes that robot doesn't care, there is a barrier between the robot and the consumer. And then consumers were also pointing out a few things that we haven't considered. A robot can be dangerous because it can make a person a cup of tea, but I might have Parkinson's or shake that day and end up spilling it all over me. So this is a very obvious situation, but yet we need to understand more about the expectations of people with disabilities when we develop robots. At the same time, I'm not here to say, let's forget AI. I am here to say that we need to do more work on AI and more work on robotics and more work on care robotics, because consumers have been able to suggest the few things that they felt the care robot would be very, very useful in. And they talked about organizing self-care. So it is not about providing care for the person, it is providing independence and support for independence that this person might need. And it was interesting also to hear that very clearly our participants were talking about how a robot should not look like a person. There is a lot of research that talks about anthropomorphization of robots, and yet our group of participants was very much against it and was talking about it needs to be a robotronic thing. I need to know that this is a robot. I do not need it to look like a live individual. So they were talking very much about how they want input in the design. And again, this is why we need to talk about marketing and inclusion, because by including consumers in the design and by engaging with them very early on, and I know some of this work is already happening, we can advance understanding of how to design the robots, but also we will gain a better understanding of how to redesign a care service system that incorporates robots and yet that also listens to consumers and doesn't exclude them. Organizations and brands are listening to these expectations. So for example, a very large organization, General Mills, this is its 4-pillar strategy, and they recognize now consumer inclusion as a separate and very distinct pillar of their development. And ultimately, an additional benefit of emphasis on inclusion when we talk about marketing is innovation. And there is so much innovation happening. I don't know if you can see, so IKEA developed these extended legs for the sofa for people with disabilities who cannot sit down deep as the sofa is produced. They've developed those pencil holders. There are the plasters that are produced for different skin colors. Football clubs are getting involved to promote equality, and here is an example of Chelsea promoting Say No to Anti-Semitism, but they also work in other areas. And then Morrison's, again, the very local origin brand, have been pioneers in introducing quieter hour. And quieter hour is a couple of hours in the morning when people with sensory impairments can shop without being overloaded with loud music and sounds. So there is a lot of innovation that has been stimulated by this demand. And I hope that it continues because there is a lot more room for development. Beyond the matters of inclusion, this is my very recent work, is the subject that is very close to my heart, that has affected our family as well. I am looking at marketing and war. And it's counterintuitive to think that people would be thinking about marketing in war, but marketing is doing some very important things at war. One of them is the free app that teaches civilians to provide home medical first aid. So if, for example, somebody is hit by shrapnel, as a civilian, you will know how to do it by following the app. Any buildings have been destroyed, so there is this social enterprise depicting the destroyed historical buildings and capturing the history as it happens. So this is another area of work that I'm developing right now, and I want to say hello to my good friend and colleague Natalia, with who we have been collaborating on these projects, even when she was in Kiev in the early months. So very excited to see what other projects we developed in this area. Okay, I'm conscious of the time, and I am going to just close by saying thank you to everyone. It truly makes a village to make an academic, and I am very, very grateful. I always say that half of my PhD is my husband's PhD, because he had put up with many sleepless nights on my part, looking after the children, taking them on holiday, and even coming to rescue me in France, where I managed to go without my documents, so I could not come back. So a big thank you to my children as well for, again, putting up with me working all the time at the time of me doing my PhD, so thank you. And again, to family, friends, and colleagues, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I look forward to your questions.